Hello, welcome to another episode of The Edge. My name is Morgan Matthews. Many individuals think of cheerleading of just standing and clapping on the sidelines. Cheerleading has changed dramatically since 1898 when 6 men started a yell leader group. It switched from chanting and yelling to girls in long skirts doing mature lifts to modern cheer, including gymnastics and eccentric lifts. Joining me today is one of the head coaches at Pittsburgh Pride Cheer Gym and program director, Ali Bianco. How would you define a sport, and how would cheer meet that definition?
I would define a sport as something that is physically active and competitive. So I think that cheerleading really fits that mold quite well.
So many people don't really consider cheerleading as like competitive because they're thinking of it like as they do in school cheer, like on the sidelines. How would you say that like cheerleading is more competitive than it is that?
I think people don't really know what cheerleading is, so because they have the mindset of what it essentially used to be, they don't know that it has evolved so much since the start of cheerleading in itself. And now it's more than just cheering on the sidelines. It's people meeting at competitions and performing different skills and different elements to essentially compete against each other and see who does it the best. So I feel like cheerleading has just totally changed in itself, and I don't even know that the sport should essentially be still called the same because it's totally just become a different dynamic.
Yeah. So you said that like there's a different kind of skill needed for, say, competitive cheer rather than school cheer. How do you think that the two, sports differ from each other?
I think school cheerleading is different because the purpose of school cheerleading is to support a team or support your school or whatever organization you're with. Whenever you're in a competitive cheerleading aspect, you're competing for yourself, and it's for your program and not trying to support another team or cheer them on the sidelines. It's specifically you are the highlighted piece instead of the sport being played.
How do you say whenever people talk about cheer, they think that you're they know that you're competing against each other, but everybody says it's more of a cutthroat. But in your, gym, you like to keep it more positive and keep people coming together. Mm-hmm. How do you keep that going, even though that the industry keeps changing and keeps getting more cutthroat?
Yeah, it's definitely a very intense industry, but at the end of the day, I feel like people are involved in sports because they genuinely enjoy it. So that's something that I really want to make sure that stays throughout my coaching career, is that people are doing it at the end of the day because it's fun and they enjoy being involved in it. So just trying to keep that always as a focus in the gym.
Okay. As a coach of at Pride, why do you prefer coaching for all-star cheerleading instead of school cheerleading?
I've just always grown up around all-stars. Since my mom had opened a gym in 1999, I've just always been around it and really enjoyed the competitive aspect in it, comparison to cheering on the sidelines, and it's just I like the competitive nature about it.
You said that the gym opened in 1999. Since then, cheerleading has changed a lot. How did it change for your family as it's changing?
It's changed a lot because when I was growing up, I remember just when my parents first opened, a sports business and sports facility, my mom was first running tumbling classes in one of my dad's batting cages. And then now, we have multiple floors and trampolines and different apparatuses to help us grow in the sport as well. So just for me, thinking back to whenever I started doing it in comparison to now, it's completely changed.
It's changed a lot, which means the skill has changed as well. Why do you think that makes cheerleading more of a dangerous sport?
I think just because there's more risk involved now and people are trying newer skills and elements in their routines and whatnot. Just like any sport kind of evolves and everything gets better and the stats get a little bit higher for each sport. The same thing has happened with cheerleading, but just I think a little bit more at a rapid pace in comparison to other sports. But it's also made the sport a lot of fun to watch now.
Most people don't watch competitive cheerleading. How would you describe all-star cheerleading to somebody who doesn't really know what it is?
I would say a lot of it is comparison to like a floor gymnastics routine as far as tumbling goes. And then you also add in the stunt elements as far as lifting people up and throwing people in the air, doing basket tosses and flips and jumps, and also dance, so it is also a performance-based sport, but there's so many more elements as far as it being competitive and difficult that are in there as well.
Nobody really knows about like the more competitive teams, and I know you were on the USA all-girl team. How did that change your view on like your stance of cheer?
It was definitely an honor to be able to compete on the USA all-girl team. And it kind of just opened my eyes to how much it's also impacted people in other countries, because I got to compete against like Team Australia, Team Canada, Team Finland, and seeing how much the sport has evolved and now is a dominant sport like across the world has really opened my eyes to just how big the industry has grown.
How did being on that team physically affect you and mentally?
It was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. And the training process for it was it was a short amount of time, but it was a lot of practice hours in that time. So when we went to go practice for the team, it's people from all different schools that kind of come together, and then they make up the one team. So they bring all these people from across the United States to Florida to practice for 2 weeks. And then we have 3-day practices for every day of the week, and there's not really a time frame on how long your practice is or how long it essentially goes. But the entire 2 weeks, you're just basically pushed to your ultimate limit as much as you can take. And physically, it was really draining, and mentally, it was also very draining as well. But it was also just really, really rewarding.
Did you have to figure out different ways of cheering? Because I know you went from cheering at school and then cheering on the competitive team, and how did that differ from being on the U.S. team?
It was very different because there are so many different styles within the sport, so bringing everybody together from different states to try to create one team where everybody was on the same path or the same mindset. That was one of the most challenging parts about it. And then also people are using different techniques. So it's whose technique is the best? Which technique do we use? Because you also want the team to look unified and all similar as far as you competing together and keeping everything looking good on the mat. So it was definitely a challenge as far as trying to see what styles to use and what techniques to use.
What types of reactions did you get from people? Because you were probably away from your family and your friends, and most people might not have known where you went. And when you told them, what kind of reactions did you get?
People were at first really surprised because I didn't tell anybody I was trying out for the team except for my parents and my teammates that I cheered with at Moorhead. So whenever I told people that I made it, they were like, well, I didn't even know you were trying out. And to be honest, in my mind, going into the whole process, I was not even thinking that I would make the team. I was like, this is just going to be a really cool experience. I'll just try it out and get to say that I tried, And then once I found out that I made the team, it's kind of like a dream come true. I'm just like, how did that actually happen? But it just also goes to show that you can really do anything if you put your mind to it. So
how did that experience help your coaching as an all-star coach?
It's definitely made me more diverse and just seeing different techniques and different styles and because I was also coached by somebody else that I've never met before. So me trying to adapt as an athlete and just experiencing that, I realize now kids that come from different programs and come in, they're also trying to adapt the same way that I did. So it just made me I would say it made me more diverse.
Was it hard to, like you said, adapt? And like, how did that also affect you, like as a person?
As a person, it definitely has pushed me, and it's made me grow as an individual, which in return I think helps the kids that I coach, because it helps them be, pushed as well, because I was used to that, and that's what I want to give them, and I want to make them not only really strong athletes, but also just strong individuals.
I know you strive to push your athletes. As one of your athletes, I know you've pushed me a lot. How do you train like kids specific to what they need pushed on?
I think every kid is different, so I always try to look at, while still being fair in how I coach, I know different kids need different coaching styles sometimes. So I think me being able to identify that and help those kids get through the way that I know that they can do best, that's definitely been beneficial for the teams and the individuals.
How do you train each, like you said, team differently from each level?
So it's more so than I think the level is the age. So I usually approach a youth age team differently than I would approach a senior age team, just because I know where their mind is at that stage of life, So where the younger ones need a little bit more of like a pep talk and I don't want to say coddling too, but a little bit more of just treating them as their age in comparison to the older ones. So I definitely approach each team differently, but still like to be fair across the board.
Okay. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will be continuing our discussion on cheerleading. Hi, welcome back to The Edge. I'm Morgan Matthews, and this is Ali Bianco. We're going to continue our conversation on cheerleading. So, I know that there's males in the cheerleading industry. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that they're treated differently than other boys that play like football or soccer? How do you think they're like viewed upon differently?
I think people view cheerleading, because they're unknowledgeable about it, as just a feminine sport. So I think the more that we can, the more that the industry grows and the more that the sport grows, I think people will be a little bit more open-minded to it not being so closed off to that. Because I have a lot of male friends in the industry that, are some of the most masculine people that I know. And I just think that because it was kind of brought up to be more so only with females involved, people tend to just be closed-minded to that. So I think that the more that the industry does grow, that'll hopefully start to change.
How do you believe that people will take into consideration, like the males in cheerleading are masculine and are doing a sport, and rather than they do now as see them as not?
I think still the more that the industry grows and the more that we can try to educate people about it. So I know that it's kind of a different mindset with like northern states, because in southern states it's a little bit more popular or common for a guy to play football and also be on a competitive cheerleading team. So I think as that starts to kind of dwindle its way up to the northern states, and that'll kind of help people be a little bit more open-minded to it. But then also the people that are involved in the industry, we can help try to spread the word and spread the knowledge about the sports that people that don't really know about it get to actually understand what we do.
You said something about how cheerleading is different in the north than it is in the south. What are some of the differences that are in each hemisphere?
I think because it is more common there, it's just more accepted, and it's more looked at upon as a both female and male sport, where as here, it's just, I think it is a little bit more closed off to that. There, you do see less males involved in the sport in Pennsylvania, and whenever because I work for a cheerleading company, and I travel to different states and different locations, where if I go to a camp that is more southern, there is a lot more males that are in the gyms, or a lot more male coaches. So I do hope that it continues to grow and feed up its way to the northern states.
Why do you think it's like a major importance for there to also be males in cheerleading other than just females?
I think it adds a really cool dynamic to the sport. It is the way it is. Females are typically more petite than males. So when you add in the male aspect to our sport, they're able to do some more higher baskets or some more elite pyramids and stunts just because of their size. And it does add a cool turn in the sport, because then you get to see a whole different side of it as well.
How do you think that, since there are teams that are co-ed and there are teams that are all girl, how do you think that they differ?
I think the general part of the sport and the part of what's being performed is similar. Kind of like I said before, though, as far as when there are males involved, you're able to do a little bit more with baskets and pyramids and things like that give a different look to it. You'll typically see more co-ed stunting, which is just one guy under one girl, where in an all-girl team you see about 3 people under one girl. So the stunts itself are very similar, but they look different because it's just performed in a different manner.
Do you think that males perform differently, and how does that change the view of the routine?
I think depending on the style of the routine, males perform a little bit differently, or just the personality of whoever's performing, just like it would be for a female. If you have a female that's a little bit more outgoing or not afraid to perform, you'll get a different view on performance, and the same with a male. And for example, in college, you have UCA and NCA. There are 2 different styles of cheerleading. So in a UCA style routine, you see more of the males not doing as much of the choreography, in comparison to an NCA school that the males are more involved in the choreography and the dances in the routine.
People don't really understand the difference of cheerleading as college cheer and competitive cheer and school cheer, and competitive cheer and college cheer are both scored. How would you describe that cheerleading is scored?
In All-Star, it's scored differently because we compete on a spring floor. So because of that, we're able to do a little bit more with tumbling. So when you go to a competition that has an all-star routine, there's more tumbling on the score sheet. Whereas in college, they compete on a hard mat. So tumbling is not as much of a focus as it is in all-star cheerleading. So the score sheet in a college routine is typically more stunt-based.
Do you think for college levels that tumbling is as important, and how do routines compensate for tumbling not being as much scored?
I think it's still important, but I think whenever you kind of switch into a college routine, the stunts are a little bit more focused in on, just because of the score sheet. And that also differs between a UCA and an NCA school. So it's kind of more so the style that you pick, and then that score sheet is catered to that style.
I'm bringing back the boys. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that boys really are important in a co-ed team, for there to be more to help the team excel in the typical co-ed division where there are a lot of boys rather than just a bunch of girls and a single boy?
Yeah, so if you look at, for example, whenever I was on the USA team, I was on the all-girl team. So there also was a co-ed team that was competing at the same competition for USA. And when you look at that team, the team was actually predominantly males. So it just looks like a totally different routine, because now you're seeing the whole floor be almost dominated by males, because they are the ones lifting the stunts, where almost every female involved in that routine is being lifted or in a stunt. in comparison to the all-girl one where the girls are lifting each other.
In the USA, like the teams, I know you won, and did the co-ed team also win that year, or?
The co-ed team did win that year. They did.
People probably did not understand. They're like, how did you both win? How would you like explain to somebody that both teams can win? Like, how would you explain that to somebody that doesn't know cheerleading?
Just the fact that there is always going to be an all-girl division and a co-ed division. So because there were two separate divisions, that all separated. So like whenever there's also the USA dance team, and then there's different dance teams within that. There's the hip-hop team, there's the jazz team. So it's all just different divisions because it just makes the competition a little bit more fair.
Do you believe like people, they don't see it as much of a sport because there's not as much competition, and is that because of like cheerleading, like the divisions are smaller, and people are saying that it's not nationals, there's too many divisions, you're not competing as much. How would you like combat that?
Yeah, so there is, like if you go to any competition within the area, we call those local competitions, those typically have smaller categories as far as how many people you're competing against. Then there are some bigger nationals in places that like we're going to Dallas and just different locations that host the bigger nationals. And then there's ultimately the end competition of the season, which is the most competitive one, and that would be the World's competition, and then also Summit for the younger levels and younger teams. So I think those competitions are, I guess, essentially our Olympics of cheerleading. So I think those ones are the ones that you can really justify as being like, no, there is a lot of people here, and there's a lot of people that tried to get here that weren't even invited to come to this competition because it's so seclusive. But from the time that Worlds or Summit even started, those competitions have grown drastically where they created their own venue in Disney World, so it is growing, it is evolving. I just think the more that it does, then people will start to take the sport a little bit more serious.
How does like having the goal of going to Worlds and like getting the bid to Summit, how does that change your stance on coaching as like how you push your athletes?
I think because all the kids want to essentially compete at that event, I have to push them to a level where if that is their goal, I'm totally on board for it. But it does change the way that we coach a little bit just because it is a higher standard, it is a higher level, and it is a little bit more competitive where you can't just go to an event or a competition and expect to get a bid or get invited. You have to do something that stands out in comparison to everybody else that is there. So I like to push the athletes to think like, what's going to separate you from everybody else? And then that kind of helps them get a mindset on how to do that.
How do the competition at Worlds, they're you do more dangerous things, and then more like local competitions, people are pushing more. Why do you think that's true?
As far as like the level being harder at Worlds?
Like people are trying more stuff that are dangerous or stuff that can lead to accidents and injuries.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes into how well your coach is trained. I think a lot of people, because people are trying to make the sport grow and they're trying to grow the industry, but that also results in some people trying to teach the sport that aren't as knowledgeable in it as they should be. So I think that it is important to make sure that whenever a coach is taking on that role, that they're going to get certifications, they're going to conferences, they're going to learn and be more educated in how to coach the sport effectively and properly. So I think because of the lack of knowledge in coaching in our industry, that also results in some injuries, and that's unfortunate, but that's kind of the same with any sport. There could be a baseball coach out there that doesn't really know what he's teaching or instructing as well. So I think in every sport it's really important for the instructor or coach to be knowledgeable, but they are creating more of a outlet for coaches to be trained in comparison to maybe 10 years ago.
Okay, what type of training did you have to go through to become a coach at this high of level where you're having athletes doing double twists and a backflip? what kind of training did you have to go through to be able to teach that?
So all of the coaches at the gym are USASF certified. So that's kind of the governing body for our roles in the sport. So we all had to take online tests. We had to go and do a test face-to-face with somebody that was asking us questions, how we would react to certain situations, how we would teach a certain skill. So it was kind of a long process in trying to get all of that.
All right, we are out of time. Thank you, Ali, for joining me in discussing cheer as a sport and your experiences in it. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of The Edge. Thank you.